evening. Welcome to the show. This is the day on this lovely Thursday. To the TV family, welcome. To the radio family, to Endele. We've been together from 4 to 6 p.m. Hope you're having an easy day. I know traffic is a bit crazy, but you get to hang out with us as we learn something new. So last week we started our series on understanding childhood trauma. What does that mean? And we defined it. We looked at bullying and punishment and how that changes your personality way into adulthood. So I thought this week, why don't we pick it up on something that's a bit close to home? What happens when you grow up in an environment that may cause you trauma? I'm talking about domestic violence. I'm talking about drug abuse, emotional neglect, all those things. And in studio today, I have an able psychologist who's going to break it down for you to make sure first you understand what kind of trauma you may have, and if you already have it, how do we move forward? His name is Silas Kiriinya. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking time off your busy schedule and making time to be here.
Thank you.
When I watch football,
kiasi.
Utawatch?
Yes.
Sawa, karibu sana.
Thank you very much.
And I was trying to tell you off air that sometimes people don't know they have trauma, and that's something we learned from last week's feedback.
Very true.
And this week we want to understand what can your environment do to you. And just to make sure so that you don't run out of time, let's just get into it. Drug abuse. You grow up with either a mother or father who's an alcoholic, or maybe you lived with someone in a house and you saw them abuse drugs. What kind of trauma does this cause on a child?
Now, to begin with, I think it's really important for us to define what trauma is, which is any human subjective experience which makes one feel like life is in serious danger, like even death might occur anytime. You feel helpless, and at the same time, it's an experience that involves a lot of horror, whereby you're really afraid, and after that, there are many other reactions that you experience. Basically, these experiences change your perception so that you see things in a different way. You think about things in a different way. You also behave in a different way and act in a different way. Okay. Now, after defining that, when we talk about drug and substance use, is an experience that is almost, very close to us. Because 80% of humanity, we can say that we have experienced, at least we have seen somebody who is drunk, or a neighbor or a family member who has used some substance to some extent. So it means then this experience is with us, and it is with us particularly when we are growing up. Therefore, when children are growing up, we know very well when parents are using substance, for example, they are not in control of their own activities, their own actions, their own words. So they are likely to maybe even abuse their children, neglect their children, and to some extent they may behave inappropriately in front of their children, or speak in a manner really that is not appropriate. And therefore such information will traumatize children. And when children get traumatized, then they will kind of exhibit the symptoms of those the traumatic experiences. Now, we know very well if somebody is drunk, you're likely even to be violent to some extent. And when you're violent, you remember that the children, the first world of the children is the world of the parents, is the world of the caregiver. Therefore, the concept that you give to them are the concept that they perpetuate as they grow up in their lives. So if, for example, you become violent, yet they expect you to love them, so what will happen is that they get trauma automatically. Some other times, if you're using substance, you also neglect your children because you're not able even to take care of yourself, or you're using all the money into drinking, and therefore you cannot provide for them. They are, every time they are chased from school to go and bring school fees and all that, you remember? For example, like when you're growing up, you go to school and you're told today you cannot enter into the class because school fees has not been paid. And therefore that experience traumatizes a child, because the child will ask always, why are the others in school and I'm not allowed to be in school? And therefore they get trauma out of that. You go to school when you have clothes that are torn because your parents have drank all the money, and therefore you look at others, they look smart. And for you, sometimes, teachers will also punish the children without knowing that this is not the fault of the child. It is the fault of the parents. And so you can imagine what can come out of that experience where a parent uses substance.
There's also something else that sort of happens. From research and also hearing stories from other people, if you grow up in a home where drugs are abused, this could be alcohol to the extreme end where you might use the hardcore drugs. When this person grows up, they either will never use drugs or they will continue the cycle. Maybe just explain the two perspectives for us.
Now, according to the research that has been done and the statistics that are there is likelihood of inheriting, if I can say so.
Yeah.
Where you, from your genes, you get some, the addiction basically into your system, such that when you are born already addicted. But now, this is not an active addiction.
Okay.
What happens is that you are disposed, you're kind of predisposed to addiction, such that the moment you try a substance, you cannot stop yourself.
Okay. Yeah.
But also, if you don't try any substance, then it means you may live with that inclination of addiction, but you will not be addicted yourself.
Okay.
The other way is, for example, if my parents use substance, as I grow up and I notice that they are very violent and they neglect us, therefore I will tell myself when I grow up, I will make sure that I don't use substance at all, because I would want, to have a life that I did not have, or I would want my children to have a life that I missed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hear you. Does that explain why sometimes you'll find maybe a dad or a mom will use alcohol, and then the child sort of automatically starts to use alcohol as well? Is that the biological explanation?
Yes, that's a biological explanation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what happens when you grow into adulthood? You start making your own money, and these people carry the behavior into maybe their marriage. Is it possible again to pass it on to your children? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, there is that possibility. But also remember, when you're forming your perception, you form the perception depending on the environment you live in.
Okay.
For example, if I grow up in an environment where substance is being abused, the only environment that I understand is an environment where there is abuse of some substance. And therefore, even when I grow up, I am uncomfortable actually with any other environment other than the environment where drug is being used.
Okay.
So that becomes normal for that child.
Yeah.
So even when they grow up, they remain in that level. Now, other people, or what I would call onlookers, they may look at you and think that you have a problem. But for you, you don't see a problem at all.
Okay.
Because this is your environment. This is an environment that you understand. It's more comfortable in that environment than trying anything else that is not substance use.
Okay,
Yes.
I get you. So let me speak on another example that usually happens. A lady may grow up with a dad who took a lot of alcohol, probably smoked his lungs out. And then they end up marrying someone like their own father, and you're thinking, what happened? So what's the psychology behind that?
Basically, it's what I'm calling perception.
Yeah.
You see, when you're growing up, the man figure that you know is the man who uses the substance.
Okay.
Is the man who abuses the substance, is the man who is violent. And that is the only environment that you know. That's the only man that you know. Therefore, in life, when you're looking for a man, you will not look for any other man but the man that you have in your mind. You don't look for things that you don't have. You look for things that you have in mind.
Okay.
Okay, or a picture that you have created in your mind.
Okay.
So when these children are growing up, they create a certain picture, and unfortunately, this picture that you have in mind is picture of a wounded person, if I can say so.
Yes.
Somebody who has been using substance.
Okay.
And therefore, you find yourself more comfortable with men who drink, with men who abuse substance, and therefore you just get married.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing is, you may have experienced, for example, violence in your family.
Yeah.
Like your dad uses the substance or your mom uses the substance, and then there is fight in the family. And so you tell yourself that I will never get to a man who uses substance.
That's true.
Okay?
Yeah.
Or I will never marry a woman who uses substance.
Yeah.
And therefore, when you find yourself in that kind of environment and your spouse is using the substance, you tell yourself now, yes, this has happened. But will I lose my marriage maybe as my mother lost our marriage? And therefore, you realize that you stick in that relationship even when it is not working.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do we break it? How do you make sure, even if you grew up in a home where this happened, that you don't carry it forward to maybe your own marriage and your kids? How do you break it?
Now, let me say that not every child will go through such experiences as they are growing up, and ultimately when they become adults, they kind of reproduce or replicate what they experienced as they were growing up, okay? Because some people go through some interventions somewhere along the way.
Yes.
Maybe let's say you are a Christian and you go to a church and you come to realize that it's a different life.
Yes.
And there is God who is all powerful, who is able to help you and change your situation. And therefore, because of that, you kind of now begin having a new kind of perception and a new way, outlook of life. And when you start viewing life that way, then it means you're likely not to go really and use the substance,
Okay.
but you will be a different person.
Okay. Yes.
But there are others who definitely, because of that trauma, they are likely to be like their parents.
Okay.
Now, how do you break the cycle? First of all, is getting to know, like you are aware how much you have been affected by the trauma
Okay.
that you went through.
That's true.
For example, the use of substance in the family. Now, once you know that, you get also to know how that experience has affected your perception, the way you interpret the world, the way you interpret reality.
Okay.
Such that every time you're reacting to a certain reality, you ask yourself, am I reacting to this very experience which is here with me?
Yes.
Or I'm reacting to those experiences that I went through as I was a child, growing
Yeah.
as a child,
Yeah.
in this one particular experience.
Okay.
For example, if a child is growing up and is very resentful about the father, like you have a lot of anger because your dad was not available, or
Yeah.
when he was drunk, he kind of assaulted you,
Yeah.
or abused you in whichever way. So you kind of live with that anger and that
Okay.
bitterness.
Yeah.
And remember, as a child, maybe your language is not developed to be able to express what happened or share with people, and therefore you kind of keep that to yourself as you're growing up.
Yeah.
And therefore the bitterness kind of ferments to a point that it becomes poisonous. So when it becomes poisonous at that point, then it means every other experience that you will have, it will have a little bit of the poison that you got from the first experience.
Okay.
And therefore, when you are reacting, for example, let's say you got married and your spouse is not behaving well, is
Yes.
somehow behaving like your dad or like your mom.
Yeah.
So when you look at them, you not react at them or at what they are doing. You
Okay.
react at all the experience and the bitterness
Yeah.
and the poison that you have from your past relationships with your parents. So you react in this one particular person.
I get
understand?
you. I get you.
Now, when you become aware, you are able to dissect. Such that if I'm acting here and now, and not acting here and now with the emotions of the last 2 years, 3 years, 50 years down the line.
That gives so much clarity, because sometimes someone may react and you're thinking, all I did was leave a cup in the sink and it brought all those things. And I'm happy to report there's a new member to the party. His name is Reverend James Mbogwa, also a lecturer at African Nazarene. And there's something he's told me that I'm thinking we need to do a show about that. And it's called non-substance addiction, but a story for another day. Today we are talking about trauma. So karibu sana.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you here. I told you that Silas mentioned a couple of things, but now let's talk about domestic violence. First of all, what does that do to a child?
Thank you so much. Domestic violence, whenever it happens in a home, the number one thing that it does to a child is disorient this child.
Okay.
Because a child wants to grow in an environment of security. And when there is no security between daddy and mommy, what happens in the mind of this child is that I am not safe in the place that I'm supposed to be the most safe, the
Okay.
home environment.
Okay.
So this child is left feeling a lot of frustration, feeling a lot of fear, because the most safest place on earth has turned out to be actually not safe. And then security between daddy and mommy means security for the child. When it misses out, the child feels very, very insecure.
Okay.
Yes.
So the first thing is total disorientation.
Total disorientation.
Okay. Silas, your comments on the same. What happens to even the mind of a child when that happens?
Now, when you go to the mind, according to the research that has been done,
Yeah.
there is association of trauma and the cortex part of the brain,
Yeah.
which deals with quite a number of things. Part of it is concentration, focus, executive activities, and all that. Therefore, the moment a child experiences that kind of trauma, what happens is that part of the brain is kind of reduced. And when it is reduced, then what
Okay.
will happen is they start having issues even with concentration. They start having issues with behavior itself. So they start behaving in a manner that really is either inappropriate
Yeah.
in terms of the developmental mileage and all that.
Okay.
And also children getting quite hungry, and they themselves also becoming abusive.
Okay.
So it can affect them in many, many ways. And for example, like what he's saying, that when a child notices that the world around them is not safe, then it's not just about the home. It is the entire world for them. When they find themselves in school,
Yeah.
it is not safe.
Okay.
Wherever they find themselves is not safe.
Okay.
And therefore, when they get even into intimate relationship or close relationships, they still feel is not safe enough.
Okay.
And that's why, for example, if you realize very well, there are many people who have come and they say, Silas, I have a problem. I cannot sustain a relationship for more than 3 months.
Oh, goodness.
Now,
Yes.
when you do exploration, proper exploration, you come to realize that the first experience of relationship had pain in it. It was like coupled or, put together with the pain,
Yeah.
what I call the association. So every time a child thinks of a close relationship, pain concept comes in. And so every time they come so close to somebody, the concept of pain starts, creeping into their minds.
I get
and
you.
they start feeling so insecure.
Yeah.
The same environment that they were growing up as children.
Okay. Reverend, I'd like to ask you, what happens when you grow into adulthood and you've grown into that environment? What are the ways that you can tell that this person is traumatized, or even I am traumatized by that?
Probably before we get to the adult level,
Yeah.
something else about this child, which is very, very worrying. You have heard what the brain is doing.
Yeah.
What also happened at the behavior level is what we call regressive behaviors.
Okay.
You'll find a child of about 14 years who was not bedwetting, starting to bedwet. Then this child becomes very withdrawn. A prayerful child becoming very withdrawn. And then, of course, if this is happening at that particular time, this will be a mental picture that will be taken later on in adulthood.
Okay.
And one thing that happens is that if this child was not able to go through that phase to the next phase, like now in adolescence, about the issue of socialization and the like, you will find this one being carried in later in life. And the likelihood of this child becoming an abuser is very, very high.
Okay.
Yes, and
Maybe-
even
yeah.
the chances of this child even becoming psychopath. Somebody without empathy
Yeah.
who will kill for pressure without feeling anything else, because that aspect of empathy was removed from him because of what he has been seeing. And especially if this domestic violence is coupled, oftentimes what happens in our society with sexual abuse.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, I wanted you to maybe just elaborate more on that, on how this can make you an abuser, and maybe you've touched on it. Maybe just add more details on the same.
What happens is that the child gets to learn it is all right to abuse. Because mommy is being abused, she's not taking a step, daddy is doing it, therefore it is okay for me as an adult to do the same thing.
Okay.
Remember, children learn by modeling behavior of the significant others.
Okay.
If my daddy is doing it and then there's no repercussion, then for me it must be okay. So in childhood, and then of course that trauma that was never dealt with, that I was abused, I saw this happening. It happens at what we call the secondary trauma level.
Okay.
Because I'm seeing it so often, nobody is addressing it. Then I carry all that pain. It is the pain of the child who never enjoyed their childhood. So in adulthood, this child are those children we call children growing up with the pain of childhood.
Okay.
Adults who have never really grown up because the maturity that was expected of them
Yes.
never happened. So basically, they are children growing up with pain even when they are 40 years.
In addition to that,
Yes.
you see, in addition to what he's saying, the moment a child goes through traumatic experience, maybe a violent dad, a violent mom, so what will happen is, at that moment, they are not able to fight for their rights.
Yes.
Now, as they grow up with that kind of energy within them. And so the moment they go to school, when they get an opportunity to fight for their own, safety and whatever,
Yes.
they will really fight.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So unconsciously, they are trying to kind of revenge what happened to them when they are growing up. But they don't know, but
Okay.
it's just so unconscious.
Yes.
But they find themselves doing that. Extreme of that, by the way, that is something else I've noticed. If, for example, a dad is violent in the family, that can lead a girl, other than getting married to a man, gets into relationship with the same sex. Because my mom was cool and my dad is the one who was abusive.
Okay.
Therefore, I will never get into a relationship with a man. And so they find themselves into a relationship with a girl.
Okay.
The same thing can happen even to
A man.
a boy or a
Okay.
man.
There's something you also mentioned in regards to you can either be an abuser or be compliant. Please explain that concept.
Now, abuser is basically what you have explained.
Described, yeah.
Now, but the part of being a compliant is whereby you tell yourself that I will never in my life cause any pain to another human being.
Okay.
Okay? And therefore, every time you are in a situation that you're supposed to argue a case, a certain case, which is just a normal argument, okay, or a logical argument, what I would call a logical or rational argument, you will not do that.
Okay.
Because you know the moment you do that, there will be conflict. And conflict is what you don't like in your life. And conflict is likely to lead to violence. So other than having this conversation which is likely to cause violence, then I would rather withdraw.
I get you.
So whatever it is you say, I comply. So that for the sake of what people say, for the sake of peace.
Yeah.
But you are not having that peace in your heart.
Okay.
Because when you withdraw, you are being bothered again. Why did I not become assertive enough? For example, in a relationship, your spouse starts coming home late and is drunk and whatever. So you cannot confront him because you're afraid. If I confront him, if I ask him, if I talk to him, if I tell him what I feel about his drinking, then we are likely to resort to violence.
Okay.
So I would rather not talk about it. And therefore, life continues that way. But every time you're left home alone, you can't sleep because you don't know whether he's secure, wherever he is. You know, you don't know whether when he comes home late he's coming to wake you up and finally even beat you up and whatever. So at the end of it, you're not even at peace, even in that compliance point of view.
I get you.
So the best thing is where people are assertive enough, and you're able to say, this is what I feel, this is what I'm going through, and this is how your behavior affects my life.
I get you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And unconsciously also what is also happening in the life of this compliant person, they are actually still entertaining the abuse indirectly, unconsciously. Because this lady who chooses to go into recipientism actually becomes the receiving partner, not the dominant partner.
Okay.
For the man who will go into gayism, he will become the receiving partner, not the dominant. Then if this person also finds himself in a relationship whereby probably the husband or the wife is abusing other substances, you'll find codependency rising up in this family, in which they are always defending this person who is doing this because they can't really come out assertively and seek for their position.
Okay.
Yes.
You know what you're saying, gentlemen, is bringing up the stories that we've had over and over again, and you had this discussion before we went on air. Reverend, there's something that's happening in our society where a man wakes up, kills his wife, chops his children, hangs himself. A woman wakes up, decides to kill everybody in her family and take her life afterwards. Is this as a result of trauma that may have happened, or where is this coming from?
Well, there could be several causes, and oftentimes the quickest cause is trauma.
Okay.
Trauma that has not been dealt with, either that happened earlier on or that has been recent. And especially in our situation, oftentimes you find that this man is going through too much and they're not able to come out and tell the significant other, the spouse, that this is what is happening. Either a debt, like now, today we have started the World Cup. Guys are going to do bets, and probably they're not going to involve their family. And these bets will include colossal sums, amounts of money. So if this person rules out, these are the people you find doing these kind of actions because they are done, they are finished. It's so traumatic to lose everything else.
Yes.
Then, of course, the working places, the social issues that are piling up. Like today in Kenya, let's be frank, you have seen the budget today.
My goodness,
3 trillion,
yes.
And this money is going to be gotten from Kenyans. We are overtaxed. Worldwide, this is a fact. And then out of this money, 3 trillion, probably 1 trillion will go into corruption. And that is a fact.
And already 1.7 is going into salaries.
And the other amount is going into salary. What now benefit the Kenyan? With this kind of load, and probably even as we speak, as we speak, the Petrol Commission probably is already raising fuels because this is 14th. So at the end of the day, there is too much of stress, and this stress builds up slowly by slowly. And of course, Kenyan men oftentimes don't talk of their issues. So what happens is that when they can't take anymore, the nearest person is usually those the wife, the children, and probably my property, my house. I finish everything else and we just disappear from earth.
Okay.
So this piling up of stress builds up, and ultimately it only needs a small trigger like losing that football bet.
Okay.
Yes.
You know, Silas, there's something interesting you mentioned. You're telling me if everybody was to be honest about how broken they are, would be queuing probably the way we queue when you're queuing for elections. And all this because we didn't deal with things that happened to us. Maybe just give a comment on that. It was very fascinating when you gave me that number.
The reality is we have layers and layers of trauma.
Yeah.
Kenyans and Africans in general, if I can say so.
Okay.
For the fact that what he's saying that we do not know how to express ourselves, we have not been encouraged to have honest conversations. And particularly if you're a man, you're not allowed to be weak or to look weak in any way.
Yeah.
You cannot be allowed to be vulnerable. And therefore you have to act strong. And therefore, because of that, there's a lot that you go through and you're not able to share. And so later on in life, what happens is that you experience adversity or difficult moments in life and you're not able to handle it. And because you're not able to handle it, so you start now reacting in ways that are, what I would call maladaptive ways.
Yeah.
For example, you start using the substance, you become very violent to other people, even to your fellow motorists on the way, So when that has happened, at that point, is when you come to realize that now many men, they are not able to control their situation. And remember, I have grown up knowing that a man is in control.
Yeah.
I have always grown up to told that I'm not supposed to be weak. So when there is an opportunity for me to be weak, I cannot allow it. And so I have that brokenness within me.
Yeah.
And because of that brokenness, we have many people who are now depressed. They have all kind of mental illnesses.
Yeah.
We have bipolar disorder. We have PTSD because people have gone through traumatic experiences. Yeah. They have not been able to deal with that. So when we have all these things coupled together, so ultimately we really become broken and sick. Yes.
And at some point we'll also discuss, how to move forward from that. But it's something I feel like it's a disservice if I don't touch on it. The emotional abuse and what that does, that could come, there's always this joke and it's not funny, but someone once told me that their dad went to buy milk and they never came back. It's not funny because he left that day. But what does emotional abuse and even neglect from a parent, what does that do to a child? I'll start with you, Silas.
As you said,
yeah.
we kind of downplay the emotional abuse. Because when you're sick and your leg is broken, we can tell. And people can come and tell you, sorry, you broke your leg. When you have a tumor in the brain, yeah. People will know. They will come and support you. But when you're emotionally abused, people will never see a sign, a physical sign. Yeah. And because of that, we do not know how to help. And therefore, we tend to think that it doesn't affect you. And particularly at that developmental age, yes, let's say, for example, 0 to 6 years or 7 years there, people tend to think that children are not aware of what is happening around them. But they actually pick a lot. Okay. And as they pick all that kind of information, that information is what they use to form their own perception of the world is. Okay. And so because of that emotional abuse, then we start now seeing, for example, parents who are, let's say, for example, a parent is not available. Yeah. I can go use substance and I'm not available to my children. My children do not know a word love, what love is, because I've never been there to tell them I love you. They do not know what a kiss is. So I've never kissed my children. They don't know exactly what that is. My children do not, for example, know protection, because I haven't been there to tell them that I am here for you, to protect you and safeguard you through and through. And therefore, because of that, they feel so neglected emotionally because parents are unavailable. Yeah. And because of that, they do not know themselves how to form different kind of emotions. So the only emotion that they know is those emotions of neglect and distance, because you have to avoid some pain and all that. And because of that, automatically they become so emotionally wounded. Okay. And so the reaction out of that is whereby children start throwing tantrums, or people become verbal, like they can really abuse and insult other people. If children are in school, they become very disciplined. So these are the signs of the emotional abuse and neglect.
Okay. Yes. Reverend, I'll ask you this. What does emotional abuse look in a family setup where you have a parent and a child? What does that look like?
Well, basically, a child growing up in a family requires about two things. The need for significance. Being approved for who they are. Yeah. You have done well, thank you. The other thing is affirmation. keeping on recognizing this child as an individual.
Yeah.
And that is very, very important. And this is where daddy comes in. When the Bible in Proverbs 22:6 mentions about how we bring up children and when they grow up, they'll never live this way, it includes modeling behavior, modeling the words of affirmation.
Yeah.
And daddy and mommy bringing up this child, it is cooperative parenting. And the critical thing is, my friend here, Silas, has talked about even, giving a child a kiss.
Yes.
But then the other thing is, how do we give this kiss? We are confusing our children because sometimes we are kissing them the same way we would kiss our wives, our boyfriends, our girlfriends, and it is very confusing to this child.
Okay.
A peck on the cheek is
Yeah.
enough.
Okay.
A pat on the back. When they bring a report from home, please don't check that they were number 39 out of 40. Try to affirm this child. Daddy, I see here in your visit, you got this, and last time you had this. Thank you, you are putting some effort, but you can still do better.
Okay.
They feel good.
Yeah.
Because parents oftentimes don't project themselves like 40 years ago when I was the age of this child. And I was never number one all the time.
But
Yeah.
Kenyan parents always say they were
Yeah,
all number
yeah,
one.
yeah.
You wonder who was number two.
Yes. So we need to tell them the truth.
Yeah.
Then the other thing about emotional abuse in the family
Yeah.
is keeping on belittling this child, no matter what they do. That belittling remove the self-esteem of this child.
Yeah.
You keep on wanting to compare Joe and probably the sister, Mary. And they'll never be the same. Every other child is unique, is an individual.
Yeah.
Appreciate every other child for who she is. And at the end of the day, bring them up as unique individuals. But when we keep on comparing, even comparing with the ones in the neighborhood,
Yes.
sometimes children keep on wondering, like, you could have gotten that one, or you can borrow so and so from
Yes.
their daddy.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, affirm this child, give them an identity. A name is very, very important.
Yeah.
Because when children, and especially in our current world, in which sometimes you find single parenting, children are really missing out on an identity. So they need to know that they belong, the
Yeah.
family line, the origin and the like. And emotional protection is also read these children to faith. This may sound very simple, but let the children know my God and a powerful God. Not the one who keeps on taking people to hell,
Yes.
but the God of redemption, the God of power, the God of, peace,
Yeah.
and the God of breakthrough. Once we give this picture of the caring father to these children, they'll even appreciate going to church. But the critical thing sometimes is daddy and mommy going to this church? Or is it only mommy going alone and daddy dropping the children at the gate of the
Pastor,
church?
umeanza kutetemesha
Yes.
nyumba za watu.
Yes.
Because as
So-
you say, sometimes dad will drop people off and
Yes.
go back to where he needed
Yes.
to be.
Yeah.
Okay, but I like what you said. That's a lot of clarity, finding yourself in the Word of God. Then let's talk about then how do we heal? How do you make sure that if you saw your dad, walk into the house at, probably even crawl into the house at 2 a.m. drunk, or you saw your mom even be verbally abusive to your dad, how do I heal so that I don't carry that into my union, or if I'm already in there, that it ends? Where do you start?
Now, in the healing process, it depends with the developmental mileage,
Okay.
where you are in terms of your development. Because if this is a child who is between 0 and 6 years, the first intervention that you're going to give is security.
Okay.
Is the child secure? So that if the child is not secure, then you need either to take them to a safe home or a safe place. That's the first thing. Are they neglected, for example? Are they providing? Are there food? Is there food? Is there clothing? Is there shelter for them? So those are the areas that you focus on first.
Okay.
We call it first aid. And then after that, now you seek restoration. How can you restore what has been lost in their lives? And part of restoration is what is calling validation.
Yes.
Whereby you're there, a child performs, and whatever it is that they have gotten, the results, you come and affirm them. You kind of validate them and tell them it's okay to have what you have, and this is really good. You have improved from last year or from last term to what you have today. So you cannot, without comparing them, because the moment you compare them, then you're also preparing for them for sibling rivalry. So they start fighting among themselves and tending to think that so-and-so is better than me, my sister is better than me. So the moment you see other people better than you, then it means you can only perform so much because you know there are other people are the ones who are entitled to getting A's and whatever, and for you it's just C or something down there. And therefore you're not motivated enough to be able to work and perform well. Then after doing that, the other thing is have support system that was really supportive, like people who can love this child at that age and is able to be there for them. And then after that, if necessary now, connect them to a therapist so that they can be supported. Now, if you're grown up and it's you is dealing with this process by yourself, first of all is again getting to normalize what you're going through. Understand that I am aggressive because I went through traumatic experience. I hate men because I was raped by my father. I hate people who drink because my father or my mother was using the substance. Now, it's normal to have that hatred within you, at that moment. But then you ask yourself, now, for how long will I continue hating people? For how long will I continue hating men? And yet, I am living with men throughout. Then you tell yourself, now I need to work on myself. And part of working with yourself or on yourself is visiting a therapist, a counselor who is able to journey with you. But if there is no counselor who is available, please open up and share with other people that you trust. Once you have gotten people that you can trust, pour everything, share with them. This is what I have been through in my life. But also watch, so that you catch yourself every moment you are reacting to the experiences that you went through when you're growing up. So that you react to experiences that you are experiencing right here and now. And not just kind of carrying the pain of the past and trying to offload it into
this moment.
Into the now
so it
moment.
Is a journey for sure.
It is a journey, yes.
Reverend, there's a story that I did a couple of days ago where this pastor who's based in the US was saying that he appreciates the fact that people will go to pastors, but at some point you do need professional help. So having a pastor should be a starting point. Then how do we equip the church to deal with people who've gone through trauma, even if it's at the base level before you go to Silas? How do we make the church empowered to handle that?
Well, my quick answer, and especially where children are concerned, is a prayer to our churches. Let us invest in the children ministry by getting professionals who are in charge of the children ministry. In many of our churches, including in urban churches, many of those who are handling our children ni wale watu wa kujitolea. You know, the local primary school teacher, somebody whose heart is not fully there. So we need to actually budget for this ministry because, of course, these, and no pun intended, we call them the church of tomorrow. The children are not the church of the tomorrow. This is the church today. We need to have professionals in charge. Then it's also good, yes, to go to the pastor. But always keep on asking, how qualified are they? Are they? Because at the end of the day, everybody in Kenya today is a pastor. So the critical thing is, where are they coming from? What qualification are there? I am a great believer in the work and in the enabling of the Holy Spirit. But we also need to have some training for this so that I know how to handle these children. I really admire our counterparts down here in Kagame's place. In which he said, if you are running a church, these are the qualifications you should have. Look at the disciples. These guys were well qualified. We had doctors, we had, great guys. But we keep on saying, the church shouldn't have these guys. So for the children, we need qualified people to handle them. And then when me, as a pastor, I know this is my remit, I should look for Silas and refer these children to him. They will still remain my members. The parent will still remain my members. And even much more dedicated, because this is a pastor who cares beyond the pulpit ministry to the well-being, the social well-being of the members. So let us work together. Let us be joined together, because we still send our Christian to doctors. And I
That's
have never
true.
seen these doctors opening churches and claiming they are pastors. So we also need to be together. And especially, we cannot dare play bets with the well-being of our children. And especially in today's Kenya.
Okay.
Because once this child is abused, what happens is, if they are not dealt with, they will develop what I'll today term, I'll come with a new terminology, psychological sepsis, in which the wound continues, growing and growing, and we are just doing the first aid, the bad aid.
Yes.
And then one day, this is now what we see in society.
That's true.
Yes, killings, murders, and everything else that we are seeing. But if we address this, light from our churches, light from our schools, and these also include the school teacher. How well are they prepared? I am so concerned today, because what is happening in our schools today, the teacher has been rendered powerless.
Yeah.
Because something small is put on social media, is hyped so much until the teacher is afraid to handle these children of ours.
Okay.
So what happens? The children are on their own. Like in secondary schools, the principal is given all the discipline because the teacher in class can't handle this.
Okay.
So what happens is that even in our schools, the children are on their own when it comes to social issues, to discipline issues, because we have made our teachers very afraid to handle our children.
Let me tell you, that's a whole other discussion. I'm being wrapped up for our final thoughts. And before even I tell you why people need to seek counseling, there's something that I asked you earlier. If as an adult, I've dealt with the issue of trauma and probably got help and healed, or maybe I'm in the process, how can I make sure this person who caused the trauma on me can actually maybe seek the same help so that we all heal together? I'll start with you. We have about 2 minutes. Yeah.
Now, in the process of healing and process of change,
Yeah.
basically the process of change, it has all kind of phases, okay? But one of the phases is the phase of restoration. Now, restoration is where you benefit and you feel like you want to give back.
Okay.
Now, giving back is where you go back to your parent, and if they are aware that they traumatized you, and that is trauma to them because they traumatized you, so you tell them, it's okay, mom, it's okay, dad, I know what you did traumatized me,
Yeah.
but I haven't been able to heal. And I think it is time we restore our relationship.
Yeah.
You talk to them in a way that you're not accusing them, but you're actually telling them, I have been able to heal and I can support you. And therefore, introduce them, for example, now to a counselor, somebody who is able to journey with them and support them through and through in their own healing process.
Okay.
Because maybe they are reacting the way they reacted to you, or they are still reacting that way, or they are still using the substance, they are still violent, because not that they want it, but maybe they themselves went through violence.
That's true.
As they were growing up.
Okay.
Or they got traumatized.
Yes.
And therefore it's just perpetuating what the world that they know.
Yes, you're actually out of time. Reverend James, last word to people in regards to dealing with trauma.
Probably a simple thing, that healing is upon me.
Okay.
Sometimes I may not work out for the others. It is my decision. It is like the forgiveness journey. I decide I'm going to let those go so that I heal.
Okay.
I may want to work on them, but they may be beyond my powers. Could be my daddy, my mommy, or somebody out there.
Yeah.
So the critical thing is, let us empower this person who was traumatized to get well, and those others may have to deal with their own issues.
Okay.
But if we can access them,
Yeah.
well and good. But sometimes it's not possible to access them. It is also a forgiveness journey in which I have decided I am not going to walk any longer with the dustbin of all that was done to me.
Yeah.
And it was so smelly on me, I need to let go so that I can heal.
Okay. Hey, Reverend, he's very real. Thank you so much. That was Reverend James Mbogwa. You're also a lecturer at African Nazarene, Silas Kiriinya, Amazon Counseling Center. As you've heard, the church can help, but it's also important to actually seek professional help. So today is the second day we are talking about this. Next week we'll be dealing with sexually abuse and what trauma that smart causes. So make sure you stay tuned next week on a day like today, Thursday, so that you learn something else. But kesho, najua tunaenda watch football. Imagine I'll still be here. So please come and hang out with me tomorrow, Friday from 6 to 7. But the radio family will be together from 4 to 6 and 6 to 7 as well. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Medrin Yambura. Do have a lovely, lovely night and enjoy the long holiday.